Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
10%. That's roughly how many women of reproductive age are dealing with endometriosis.
Yeah, it's a staggering number. And it's not just a minor inconvenience. It often means significant pain, really impacting quality of life.
Exactly. Which makes you wonder, could something as basic as our diet actually help manage it?
It's a big question because while there are medical treatments, surgery, they don't work perfectly for everyone or aren't always ideal.
Right. So lots of people start looking at other avenues, like changing what they eat.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. There's this recent study, quite a large one actually, that asked thousands of women with endometriosis what dietary changes and supplements they felt made a difference to their pain.
Okay, so this study came out of the University of Edinburgh.
That's right. And the number of participants was really impressive, almost 2,400 women, all with a confirmed diagnosis.
Wow.
Yeah, they were specifically asked about, dietary shifts, supplements they tried, and crucially, whether they perceived an impact on their pain levels.
So our goal today in this deep dive is to really unpack what this study found. We want to understand what dietary changes people reported, which supplements seemed helpful based on their experiences.
And what this might mean for listeners looking for ways to manage their own endometriosis pain.
Definitely. And we'll also cover the study's limitations, what it can and can't tell us, and bring in some wider expert perspectives too.
Sounds good. So let's start with the study's main aim. Basically, the researchers wanted to learn directly from people living with endometriosis.
Right, to find out which dietary tweaks and supplements they felt were genuinely helpful for managing pain.
Precisely.
And how did they gather all this info? You mentioned it was a large group.
They used an online survey. It ran for a few months back in 2022, from Juneteenth to September 2nd.
Okay.
And they got responses from 2,388 women, all confirmed to have endometriosis. The survey asked about changes to eating habits, supplement use, and importantly, their own assessment of how these things affected their pain.
And the fact it was online probably helped get that international reach in large number you mentioned.
Absolutely. It gave the study significant scope.
Okay, so let's get into the findings. What about diet? What were the main changes women made, and did they feel it helped their pain?
This was pretty striking. A huge majority, 84%, had tried making at least one dietary change.
84%? That's a lot.
It really is. And of those who made changes, 2/3, so 67%, reported that their pain actually improved because of those changes.
Wow. So what specific changes were linked to this reported improvement?
Well, several things stood out. Drinking less alcohol was the most common one, linked to feeling better, 53%. Who cut back reported less pain.
Okay, less alcohol. What else?
Eating less gluten and consuming less dairy were tied. 45% reported improvement for each of those.
Gluten and dairy. Okay, often talked about.
Then there was reducing caffeine. 43% found that helpful. Eating less processed sugar, like in sweets and fizzy drinks. 31% reported benefits.
Makes sense. Processed foods too, I imagine.
Yep, cutting down on processed foods generally, like ready meals and packaged snacks, helped 38%.
Okay.
And then there were a couple of specific diets mentioned. Following a low fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols diet, that's the one restricting certain sugars that can cause gut issues, helped 32%.
Right. That one takes some effort.
It does. And finally, adopting a Mediterranean-style diet, lots of plants, olive oil, fish, less red meat, was reported helpful by 29%.
That's a really interesting list.
Yeah.
What about supplements? Were people using those too?
Yes, quite a few. 59% of the women surveyed had used supplements.
And did they feel those help with the pain?
Well, among those who used them, 43% reported that the supplements did help improve their pain management. Not quite as high as the diet changes, but still significant.
Okay, 43%. And which supplements were mentioned most often as being helpful?
Top of the list was turmeric, or specifically its active compound curcumin. 48% of those who used it reported a benefit.
Turmeric, right. Known for anti-inflammatory properties.
Exactly. Magnesium was next, with 32% reporting improvement, then peppermint at 26% and ginger at 22%.
Peppermint and ginger, also interesting. So the women reported feeling better. Did the study actually measure a difference in their pain scores?
It did, yes. They looked at self-reported pain scores, usually on a 0 to 10 scale,
Ah,
and they found a statistically significant difference in the average or median pain scores. Those who reported improvement from diet or supplements had lower scores than those who didn't report improvement.
so it wasn't just a feeling. There was a measurable difference in the reported pain levels.
Correct. The difference was unlikely to be just random chance, which does add some weight to the idea that these changes might genuinely be impacting pain levels.
Okay, so we see what people are trying and that they perceive benefits, backed up by lower pain scores. What are the broader implications here? Why might these things work?
Well, a lot of it likely comes back to inflammation. We know endometriosis involves inflammation.
Right.
And many of those beneficial changes, cutting alcohol, reducing processed foods, Mediterranean diet, turmeric, curcumin, they all have known anti-inflammatory properties.
Ah, okay. So the idea is that these dietary changes might be helping to calm down some of that underlying inflammation associated with endo.
That's a very plausible explanation. Less inflammation could quite reasonably lead to less pain for many individuals.
That connects a lot of dots. You mentioned the Mediterranean diet and the low fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols diet specifically. The study pointed to those.
Yes, it did suggest those two might be particularly helpful for pain reduction. And the researchers noted that this aligns with some other existing reviews, suggesting there's a growing consensus around these approaches.
So diets focusing on whole foods, possibly reducing gut inflammation.
Exactly. They seem like promising avenues that fit with our understanding of the condition. For listeners, it might mean looking closer at elements of those diets.
But hang on, wasn't there some conflicting evidence mentioned? Like, not all research agrees on everything reported here.
That is a really crucial point. This study is valuable, but it's not the final word, and its findings don't perfectly match all other research.
Like the gluten thing. I remember reading something about that.
Precisely. This study found 45% reported less pain eating less gluten. But, a 2024 review paper actually concluded there isn't strong evidence to recommend going gluten-free for endo symptoms.
Oh, interesting. So one study says lots of women feel it helps. Another review says the broader evidence isn't quite there yet.
Exactly. It highlights the complexities. And similarly, with peppermint reported as helpful here, often used for general period pain, but specific evidence for endometriosis pain isn't robust.
Right. It shows why we need different types of studies, I guess.
Definitely. We need more rigorous trials to sort some of this out.
Okay, so acknowledging those discrepancies, what are some practical takeaways someone listening might consider based just on this study's findings?
While based purely on what these nearly 2,400 women reported, it suggests that reducing alcohol, processed sugar, and processed foods might be worth trying.
Okay, those seem like generally healthy changes anyway.
They generally are, yes. And exploring a Mediterranean or low fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols approach also seemed promising, according to this group. The good news is these shifts align with healthy eating overall and are unlikely to cause harm.
So potential upside, likely low downside for trying some of those things.
Pretty much. For some, even those simple changes could make a difference.
Now, we have to talk about the study's limitations. What can't a study like this tell us?
Absolutely critical. The biggest one is that it's observational. It sees a link, an association between diet changes and lower pain.
But it can't prove the diet caused the lower pain.
Exactly. Correlation isn't causation. To prove that, you'd need randomized controlled trials, the gold standard, where you compare groups making specific changes versus control groups in a really structured way.
Got it. Association, not causation. What else?
Well, it relies on self-reporting. People had to remember what they ate, when, and how their pain was back then.
And memory can be fuzzy?
It can introduce inaccuracies, for sure. There's also likely selection bias.
Eating.
The people who chose to do this online survey about diet and endo were probably already interested in dietary management.
Right, so they might not represent all women with endometriosis, maybe just those more motivated to try these things.
Potentially, yes. And lastly, the study didn't get into the nitty-gritty of how long people stuck to diets or the impact on other symptoms like endobelly or bloating, even though that was commonly reported.
Okay, so important context. Knowing these limitations, how do experts generally view this kind of research?
Experts tend to see it as providing valuable clues, especially when you put it together with what we already know about inflammation and how certain foods work in the body.
So, cautious optimism.
Cautious optimism is a good way to put it. It's promising, it adds to the picture, but it's not definitive proof that works for everyone.
So, if someone listening has endometriosis and is thinking, okay, what should I do? What's the expert advice?
The really strong advice is Talk to a professional. Consult a registered or accredited practicing dietitian before making big dietary changes,
Why is that so important?
because they can help make sure you're still getting all the nutrients you need. For example, if you cut out dairy, they can help you find other ways to get enough calcium. It's about doing it safely and effectively.
Makes sense. And for supplements like turmeric or ginger.
The usual advice there is try one thing at a time. That way, you can actually tell if that specific supplement is making a difference for you rather than trying 5 things at once and not knowing what worked.
Good point. So personalization and professional guidance are key.
Absolutely. Open communication with your whole healthcare team is vital for managing endo effectively.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, what's the main message listeners should take away?
I think the key takeaway is that this study offers some really interesting avenues for personal exploration in managing endometriosis pain.
It suggests diet changes might help some people.
Yes, things like cutting back on alcohol, sugar, processed stuff, maybe looking into a Mediterranean or low fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols diet, or carefully trying supplements like turmeric. These could be beneficial for some. It really supports trying a personalized approach.
See what works for your own body.
Exactly.
And if people want to learn more after listening, where should they look?
I'd suggest looking for reliable information on the Mediterranean diet and the low fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols diet, just to understand them better.
Okay.
Maybe also read up on anti-inflammatory foods more generally. But always stick to credible, evidence-based sources.
And talk to your doctor or dietitian.
Definitely. Get advice tailored to you.
Right. So as we finish up, it really strikes me how this study emphasizes the potential power of lifestyle choices, like diet, for managing chronic conditions.
It really does.
It makes you think, doesn't it? What other parts of our daily lives might hold these overlooked keys to improving our health and well-being?
That's a great thought to end on. Definitely something for all of us to consider.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.